All right, so hello everybody. I found a video that okay, I started watching it and it just seemed kind of funny. So currently I'm living in Pennsylvania. And I also really do hate rural towns. So I stopped when he got to like this like second indent in his video. I just kind of wanted to watch it with everybody else. So, yeah.
Very commonly in my comments, I get something like this, where someone is complaining,
The fuck?
"Oh, you don't understand city." So I'm tired of these brainless comments, because the actual truth is far from what these people think. Some of my favorite places in the world are in rural or ex-urban communities,
If you
and
say
what
so, man.
frustrates me is that I know that many of these places can be designed in such a better way, and just like the people that live in a city, they also deserve decent public transit too. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about rural Pennsylvania.
That I do agree with. The fucking transit in America is absolute dog shit, especially if you lived out in a rural town, which I have before, and they're fucking garbage.
So strap in, because we're going to Appalachia.
Okay, so yeah, I'm from Georgia originally, and since I live in Pennsylvania, you can kind of tell that I've been through this whole Appalachian area. Okay, so this is why I stopped. I saw this fucking photo, and I was like, oh my god, this is awful. And then I realized this is actually in Pennsylvania, strangely enough. So I'm just gonna, hopefully my reaction to this video is actually interesting.
Oftentimes, when we think of modern exurbs, images like this resonate hard with people. This is Breezewood, Pennsylvania, and a few years ago it became a meme. There are also many funny edits that can be found floating around on the internet of this image too. This image became popular for multiple reasons, but in the end, the reason why it spread as much as it did is because there are large portions of...
I've also been, well, I stopped streaming once I got to the mountaintop of giants because I realized I only had like 5 people watching on Twitch, but I was streaming Elden Ring before.
North America that look like this. And if you live here in North America, I'm sure that you can picture a place nearby that looks oddly familiar to Breezewood, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Now, just like always when Breezewood is discussed,
places, actually.
Breezewood Legionnaires will come out to defend the sacred Holy Land that is an exit off of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, proclaiming, "But this is just a rest stop. You cannot use this as an example." In one way, they are right.
Yes, you can. It's fucking ugly, and they're fucking everywhere. You go off of anywhere in New Jersey, you go off anywhere in Pennsylvania, you go off anywhere in West Virginia. Well, actually, West Virginia just typically doesn't have a lot of in it, so you'll actually have much less. But anywhere in Virginia also, you'll see ugly-ass areas like this. Hell, places in fucking, like, closer to that, also in Georgia and I guess the Carolinas also look like this, and they're fucking awful.
Right, but in every other aspect, this does look like a large portion of rural and suburban America. But let's leave Breezewood and check out Wallenpaupack Township. Wallenpaupack Township is named for the large man-made lake that resides next to it. The lake is used for hydropower and is very unique in many ways, but maybe that's the topic for a future video. Wallenpaupack Township looks like Breezewood, with wide roads straddled with strip malls and big box stores with large setbacks. It looks like many rural places in America, but weirdly, right down the road is an example of a wildly better form of rural Americana. Right down the road from Wallenpaupack is a small town called Holly. Holly, Pennsylvania was a town founded in 1827, mainly because the Delaware and Hudson Canal was finished. Other than shipping coal and goods on the canal, Holly also had a silk mill, which still exists today. But instead of being a silk mill,
That actually looks, this building looks pretty nice.
it's now part community college, part brewery, and part hotel. What Holly excels at, though, is what every American town built before 1950 is good at, which is having a great downtown that is walkable and is not car-centric at all. Again, let me remind you, this is a rural town. Now, if you're going to be a...
This actually looks nice. So maybe this video might change my mind. But as somebody who has lived in a very rural area that was built before, like built in the, like, I think like 1700s actually, Generally areas like this are extremely small. They're like 1% of the whole like town. So maybe he's gonna prove me wrong, but like as somebody who's lived in these places, I'm just gonna tell you this is extremely rare to have a whole area that's actually built like this.
Pedantic person in the comments, you're gonna be like, but Holly is in the Northeast between Scranton and NYC. That's not really rural. Holly is rural, but if you don't believe that it's a rural town, here's Marion, Kansas, a walkable farm town in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, Holly barely has 1,200 people living here, but the town has a lot of amenities that a non-walkable town might not have at all. It has its own theater for musical performances. It has affordable housing with apartment buildings. It has elderly apartments. It has multiple bars to walk to. It has sports fields. And most importantly, it still has a train station. Nowadays, the train station...
Well, in the South, which is where I'm from, you're not going to find a train station anywhere near a rural area like this. So I think this literally only works for like places in the North.
Station is only used for the Heritage Line and rail biking, but back in the day it was served by the Erie Railroad and later the Erie-Lackawanna until the 60s. It's possible that a state-funded passenger railroad connection could be built again to connect with Port Jervis, or maybe you could just go and do the more lame but easy thing of having a bus run between these places. Either way, rural places like Holly that are built for walkability deserve transit just as much as people in cities, but obviously that means within the population to support it. But speaking of things to do in Holly, not only does it have more amenities than a newer rural town, but it's also better at sustaining itself financially. Let's compare a grocery store that's down the road in Wallenpaupack Township.
Yep. So IGA, those are fucking everywhere in small towns.
This IGA is on a plot of land
Yeah.
that is 4.2 acres, and it's assessed at $1.6 million. This means that the value of the land is $380,000 per acre. Now let's compare that to a block of buildings in downtown Holly. This block between Keystone Street and Church Street is 1.8 acres in total, and it has an assessed value of $3.6 million. This brings the land value to $2 million per acre. The block in Holly is worth 6 times more than the store, so at minimum there is 6 times the tax revenue that is generated from this block. While at the same time, the block has less than half of the same road infrastructure needed to support it with state funds. Holly is financially sustainable, and the sprawling Wallenpaupack Township is not. If you want a longer video on the subject of financially sustainable infrastructure, Not Just Bikes has a fantastic video on it here.
Okay, so I see what he's saying here, but I'm also going to say that again, in most small towns, the really nicely made areas like he's pointing out that are the downtown parts are like 1 to 2% of the whole actual town, and the rest of the town is made like that, like these awful, like what he just showed with IGA.
It's just frustrating that we continue to build our ex-urban and rural places like Breezewood or Wallenpaupack Township. Instead of building a town to visit with a cute downtown, they are just places to drive through that happen to have businesses scattered on the side of the road. These places are ugly and they're not memorable, and they're not sustainable financially or environmentally. If we care about the beautiful lands that these rural places and people live in, we should be building more places like Holly, where everyone has their own house in a dense neighborhood, but there's a walkable downtown and options to live in an apartment if you need to. Not everyone can have a place in the middle of the wilderness, because once everyone lives out in the wilderness, it's not the wilderness anymore. It's just a suburban development that's hard to get to. Also, if we cared about drunk driving statistics for rural communities, we'd be focusing more on how and where people live around their favorite places to go to. It's a lot more fun to drunkenly walk home from the bar than it is to drive and put other people's lives at risk.
True.
Anyway, to close out, our rural communities are just as important to our country and society as urban places are. So, when it comes to urban planning of these places, they also deserve to have beautiful and sustainable communities with transit, just as a much larger metro area has too. It's just that everyone keeps making excuses that cars are fine, there's nothing wrong, and the state DOT standards and zoning codes are not a problem. but there is a lot wrong. But the first step to fixing it is acknowledging that there's a problem and then understanding that better models exist. We have a lot to fix, but I believe in us. Thanks for watching. I plan on doing more videos on Aurora.
Okay, so that was an interesting video. So thank you for coming to my channel, and maybe subscribe.